You are listening to the Batflip Podcast, a baseball podcast from Belly Up Sports and the Belly Up Podcast Network. Here are your hosts, Damian and Matt.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Batflip Podcast. My name is Damian, here with my co-host Matt, coming to you on our first episode of 2022. January 4th is when we're recording this one. We're going to do a little news about the CBA talks, a couple little retirements, and then we're actually going to start our first division breakdown with the lockout and everything. It's going to be a little different with the freeze, but we're still going to bring you everything of what each team lost, what they've added so far, what we still think they need to add after the lockout, and a potential outlook for what they have coming forward in 2022. But before we get to all of that, how are you doing, Matt?
Doing great. Hope everyone out there had a happy new year, and looking forward to 2022 being a good year for everyone out there. And just been a pretty good week. Just got done watching some basketball on TV and some interesting stuff going on in college basketball today, and been fun. And I'm excited to talk about some baseball now. So coming into 2022, kind of kick off our talk about a new season here. So. It'll be assuming that the season happens, but we're doing great and excited for it. So
Yeah, what you say, assuming the season happens, and that'll just kick us off to our first point that we want to hit on, and that's the Bob Nightingale reported this week, and it's been rumored from some other people as well that MLB and the players, as of right now, even still don't have any talks lined up or scheduled as of now going forward. They met twice in December to try and hit some small issues, maybe get the ball rolling, but they still haven't scheduled anything to talk about those core economic issues that need to be addressed in the game.
yeah. So on that note, I think I don't know exactly how talks being scheduled, how far in advance that has to be done. I don't know if they're planning on getting together and just not having like a scheduled date, but they're planning on getting together in a week or so, or whatever. But I think it's pretty inappropriate with the season hanging in the balance that they're not even talking. At this late in the game. I mean, they've had a few weeks to kind of simmer down a little bit and enjoy Christmas on both sides with their families, and having and after the new year they really need to go ahead and get started here now. So but we'll see what happens. Definitely disappointed there's not any dialogue going on, because that's kind of, to me, that's the thing that's ridiculous. If the two sides can't come to an agreement, blame whatever side, blame either way. It's like whatever. But um, if they're not even talking, that's pretty ridiculous. So
Yeah, so I don't know how true it actually is, but Scherzer went on a podcast. Max Scherzer, for people that don't know, he is one of the head of the Baseball Players Association. So he's like on the front line of the negotiations. He said that pretty much they've tried to just like even entertain the talks with the owners and stuff, and the owners are pretty much just stonewalling them. And that the sentiment from the owners are pretty much like that. Oh well, we'll just like keep holding. The players are going to get desperate eventually because they're not getting paid, they're not doing anything, and the players will come back to us, and then that'll be our way that we'll be able to leverage, leverage them to not get as much as they want to get and stuff. And like, who knows how how true that really is, especially coming from one of the heads that he's trying to negotiate for his side of it. But it is interesting if that is the case.
yeah, no doubt. But we'll see. Hopefully they actually figure things out. But I mean, I guess no news in this case is bad news. So
Yeah. So we'll go ahead and move on to our first little, not a first, our first retirement actually that we're going to talk about in this episode. And this one's going to be a little bit more brief than the second one. But Cameron Maybin announced his retirement. I think it was yesterday actually. Cameron Maybin was a solid, MLB player. I think he ends up with a 14.8 career WAR. Has been in the league since 2007. Had some decent overall seasons, but was more of a kind of that fourth outfielder type, not an everyday player pretty much, but just an overall solid, solid player to have.
yeah, I mean, the thing about Cameron Maybin is always going to be that he was the centerpiece of the Miguel Cabrera trade,
Mm-hmm.
and people are always going to be underwhelmed by him because of that, and the fact that he was a top, really high level prospect when that happened and stuff. But I mean, he did end up eventually, while he never became the kind of star that people were kind of thinking he might end up being, he did become eventually a pretty good player. He had a great 2011 season in San Diego where he put up 4 wins above replacement, a 105 WRC plus. That was good. He had a few good years. He had a good year in Atlanta in 2015 during the Braves rebuild. 2016 in Detroit, he had a good year. He ended up stealing 187 bases. He stole 40 bases in 2011, which is really impressive. Um, and he bounced around a little bit, played for a lot of different teams, and he made a pretty good niche out of himself as a pretty as a league average ish hitter, maybe a little below league average, but also a pretty good defensive player who could play center, and definitely a guy who could you could bring in a pinch run. So he was able to, even though he never went up to his full potential, he was able to carve out a really nice 14-year career, which was really impressive. And this past year played in 9 games for the Mets, didn't really do much, and I'm not super surprised to see him retire. He's this at his age, at 34, 35-year old this season this year. It wouldn't make a lot of sense for him to go to go to a camp just on a small chance that he gets invited to the big league club, or go play in the minors for half a season or something. It just wouldn't make much sense for him. So great career for Cameron Maybin, and congratulations to him. And I think he's a guy that I would like to have him around my team, in some, if he's interested in some form after he's done playing, because I think he's a guy who could translate well to the coaching side of things.
Yeah, absolutely. He's a great guy, and a really good clubhouse presence is something that has always been echoed about him around the league. So he's definitely a guy that, if he is interested in coaching or some sort of a front office role, he'll definitely be a hot commodity around the league. But let's get to our second retirement that we had, and this was a little bit more surprising, but that was Seattle Mariners third baseman Kyle Seager announced his retirement, actually through his wife, actually, because he really isn't active on social media. The Mariners had declined his option, so he was a free agent, but he had spent his entire major league career there. I believe it was 11 seasons. I could be wrong on that, but even this year in 2021, he sacrificed some of his average and on base for pretty much trying to go for more power. He had a career high in home runs with 35 home runs, 101 RBIs, which is also a career high. A 2.5 win season, and a career 34.8 WAR.
Yeah, this is a guy who has for his career is a very good baseball player. He's going to be one of those guys that, you talk about the Hall of Very Good. I mean, he's obviously not a Hall of Famer, but talk about Hall of Very Good, and 34.8 WAR, fantastic defender at third base, a good hitter for most of his career. 111 WRC plus in his career, but that was brought down a little bit these last few years. He put up a couple seasons at over 120. Put up his career high was 134 back in 2016. This guy was a very good baseball player, great third baseman. A guy who I wish he had. I'm kind of surprised he's retiring, because I mean he definitely still has some left in the tank if he wanted to play. I mean, he's a guy who, this year 2.5 wins above replacement, very unlucky on batted balls, just a 226 BABIP. So that average probably could have been higher. You look at his strikeout rate spiked this year, but still, this is a guy who had good plate discipline numbers for his career. I mean, just a lot of good things to be said about Kyle Seager as a guy who was a very solid everyday player for his entire career, and probably a couple 2 or 3 seasons was really an all-star worthy third baseman. So great career for Kyle Seager, and of course congratulations to him on his retirement. He's going to be he's a guy who is he's just a very good very good player, and there's nothing to be ashamed about with that career. That's a great career.
Absolutely, it's going to be a shame to not be able to, or not be able to watch Kyle Seager anymore. He had been a person that, obviously, I think I had a little bit more on my radar just because of having Corey Seager in Los Angeles for so long. Kyle being his brother, he always kind of was a player I always watched a little bit more because of that, and to see how he was always doing. Um, and he's going to be one of those, one of those icons, especially for a Seattle team. Not having played anywhere else, and a guy who the city just absolutely loves. He mentioned when he had talked, I guess after his retirement thing, that he kind of there was a lot of interest in him around the league, but he kind of felt like his career was over and really didn't feel like he could go anywhere outside of Seattle, and really put his full effort into it, and what how much effort he was putting into the Seattle team and stuff, and just felt like it was time. So, like you said, great career for Kyle Seager. It's going to be sad to see him go, but he made the most of it while he had his opportunities out there. So. But let's go ahead and jump into the division breakdown because it's going to be a longer one, as these usually are. We're going to change things up this year. Last year we started in the East and worked our way to the West, but we're going to start in the West this year and work our way to the East. So we're going to start with the American League West, just because it's been the most active division, and kind of the biggest storylines so far throughout the game in this postseason, or this offseason, I should say. So we'll start with the Houston Astros, who ended up winning this division last year with a record of 95-67. Won the division by 5 games over the Seattle Mariners, and they have a lot of turnover this offseason and a lot of question marks.
Yeah, so the Astros, obviously, you talk about their key losses. Is the biggest will be Carlos Correa. I mean, their star shortstop, the biggest free agent on the market. Um, he's been there their entire run, where since they won their first wild card win, their first postseason appearance of their current run as contenders was in 2015, and that was the year Carlos Correa came up. So he really was the guy who kind of sparked it and started it. And then obviously they've been to the World Series 3 times. He's been playing a key, been a key piece on every one of those teams. And he is a guy who maybe not absolute the absolute top dog in Houston over his time there. I mean, you've had Altuve, George Springer had a similar impact to Correa, and you've had other guys, but he's been they're all one of their all-star centerpieces of that run. And then their other key losses are they lost Zach Greinke, who spent a lot of this year injured down the stretch, definitely down get close to the end of his career. Showed signs of it this year. Didn't really pitch all that much in the postseason. Pitched a little bit. Wasn't really counted on as a key starter for them. Down the stretch. And Kendall Graveman, who they brought in at the deadline, pitched really well for them down the stretch and in the postseason. So those are 3 pretty big losses that they had. But they did add a couple additions. One, they replaced Kendall Graveman with Hector Neris, who comes from Philadelphia and has good stuff. Was a little inconsistent there, but he's got a lot of closing experience and he's got a chance to be pretty good. And for them, and then Justin Verlander, returning this year off of Tommy John surgery, he had become a free agent, and they re-signed him back. So that's really an addition because he wasn't there last year with his Tommy John surgery. So that's a big piece to get back. We'll see how effective he is after the injuries that he's had, and but that's a couple of those 2 additions are pretty big for them and really could improve their team.
Yeah, they really could, especially Verlander, if he can, get back to what Justin Verlander was before the Tommy John surgery. And if you can figure out something with Hector Neris, like you said, he has the stuff to be, a really good reliever. He's just been inconsistent, and I don't know that he ever got that much help with Philadelphia, who they've been a place that's really struggled with managing a bullpen and getting the most out of those bullpen arms. But if you look forward to what they do need going forward, obviously you're going to need some way to replace Carlos Correa at shortstop. There still is a chance that they bring Correa back. It is a small one, but sorry, excuse me. You do need to somehow replace that production at shortstop. Probably some more depth starting pitching. You do have Verlander coming back. McCullers you'll have as well, but he battled a couple elbow things in the postseason and was actually shut down. Framber Valdez and Jose Urquidy are really good arms, but neither of them have pitched over 150 innings through another regular season. So you just need some other guys who could kind of fill in that rotation throughout the year. because I doubt a guy like Verlander is going to be able to give you 200 innings. You probably can't count on that from, or even 180 innings maybe. Probably can't count on that from McCullers. You can account for a bump in Urquidy and in Valdez's numbers, but still there's going to be some innings that need to be replaced there. And then just more bullpen. Replacing Graveman is with Neris is good, but you got to get some other pieces in there as well. I think like a Yimi Garcia is another guy who I think he might have been a free agent as well. So
Yeah, and Brooks Raley too.
and Brooks Raley was a under the radar lefty at least for them. So it's just going to be kind of replacing the that bullpen a little bit, which those guys you can find from anywhere really. That the depth starting pitching just to give you some more innings throughout the year, and then replacing that production at shortstop. And then if you kind of look forward to what we kind of think of this team throughout the year, or going into 2022 so far, what are you thinking?
So, my thoughts on the needs first off. I definitely am. I think looking at shortstop, a guy that I might take a look at for them would be like a Trevor Story type. He's not gonna be quite as expensive as Correa, but Trevor Story would be pretty nice there with the Crawford boxes and the short porch in left field. And putting that valuable defense there right now. Jeremy Pena looks to be the starter at shortstop for them coming into the season, which I don't know exactly how you would think about that. But and then I think that back end starter. I mean, if you're all five guys they've got right now, Verlander, Valdez, McCullers, Urquidy, and Garcia, that's a really good 5-man rotation if they all are at full strength and work back to the way that they looked like they might. But you know, as we saw last year with some teams, you can't count on your five starters being healthy, especially when they got the question marks of Verlander and McCullers right now. So adding that back in starter would be nice. But outlook wise, I mean, the Astros, I know they lost Carlos Correa, but they're bringing back Altuve, who had a great year. They're bringing back Gurriel, who had a great year. Alex Bregman battled injuries a lot this year and had a little bit of underperformance. I don't think they're going to have an issue with I think he's going to be better this year than he was last year. You look at the outfield, Kyle Tucker's just getting better. You got Jordan Alvarez at DH. I know that their center field position probably could use a little work as well, but they've got a couple guys who look like they had some potential there. McCormick, Straw, some of those guys. And then you look at you look at them as a team. And Michael Brantley's still there. I mean, this is a team that's still a division. They're definitely the division favorite at this point. And they probably will be when the season starts, unless maybe the Angels or Mariners or somebody picks up a really big piece before then. And I think they're still the one of the AL favorites. I don't know if I'd say they're my number one favorite in the American League right now, but they're going to be one of the top two or three. When you go into the season, looking at who's going to be favored to win the AL again, and so the Astros are still going to be good this year, even with the loss of Correa, most likely.
Yeah, and especially if they find some way to replace that production. I mean, even you can say that with the team as it is right now, but if they're able to replace that production somewhat, that might even push them back into that upper echelon of the American League teams. But just interesting to see what happens after the lockout. But we'll go ahead and move to the second team in this division. That was the Seattle Mariners, who made a push late in the season and ended the season at 90-72, 5 games back of the Houston Astros. Their key losses we just mentioned was, Kyle Seager, Yusei Kikuchi, and Tyler Anderson, which were kind of, two of their starting pitchers, but not really top of the rotation guys, more of a, 4 to 5 kind of depth pieces.
Yeah, so losing those guys, losing Kyle Seager, I think will hurt. But Abraham Toro's shown some potential playing third base, so I think you could see him step in and have a similar type of production. But moving on to the additions they made, signing Robbie Ray, obviously a big upgrade over Kikuchi or Tyler Anderson, who they lost. So that'll be a really nice piece to get. You look at they added Adam Frazier as well. Adds another infielder, kind of a depth piece, another guy that they can kind of shift around through the infield, or he's played outfield too some. So kind of a versatile contact hitter that plays good defense and can play a lot of different positions. So that's a nice addition for them, without having to pay all that much for him. But I do think they still need a big bat, one of their big needs. I know that there's been some rumors that Chris Bryant could be of interest for them, which I think would be a perfect fit. He can play corner outfield, which they could probably use somebody who can do that, or third base. And, Chris Bryant with that versatility could move around at any of those three positions, which are not necessarily huge question marks because they've got some talented players potentially there. Like, you look at him as, third base, you lose Seager, but you do have Abraham Toro. He could, Chris Bryant could play. The outfield, you've got, Mitch Haniger's gonna probably be one of your stalwart pieces in the outfield. But how's Jared Kelenic gonna do? Is he gonna kind of live up to the hype that he had before last year, or is he gonna continue to struggle at the big league level? And then in center field, you don't know what you're gonna get out of Kyle Lewis, who was the rookie of the year last year but didn't play this year because he was injured. So we don't know what we're going to see out of that. And, a guy like Chris Bryant who you can move around and fit into one of those positions should be nice for them. But definitely need another big bat and then bullpen help. I, they could use us another starting pitcher too, but some of the young guys they've got, like Emerson Hancock, you got Logan Gilbert, some of those younger guys, I think they're probably not going to want to block them and kind of want to see where they're going to be at coming into the year. That might be a place they look at the deadline for an acquisition, for a starting pitcher. But we'll see what happens there. But their outlook for me is, can they take the next step? They haven't made the postseason since what, 2001. Can they make that next step forward? I definitely think that they're potentially a wild card contender, depending on who they could possibly add. I don't think as they currently are constructed, they're going to win 90 games like last year. I think they're more of a 500 type team that really overperformed last year, but they do have a lot of money to spend. And if they can add a couple more guys like a Chris Bryant or a couple big bullpen pieces, maybe another starter, this is a team that could really get moving forward. And with that farm system, they've got a lot of high upside too.
Yeah, and you mentioned that farm system right there. Even mentioning the outfield, you have a guy like Julio Rodriguez, who's one of the top prospects in baseball that will probably be up for a good majority of this season. I don't think Novelli Marte will be up this year, maybe even next year. But then you mentioned that rotation. You mentioned Emerson Hancock. You have George Kirby, who's another high profile pitching prospect for them that should be up pretty early on this year. And then even a guy like Brandon Williamson, a left-handed pitcher, has been the highest he's got is Double-A, but you could see him even get the call up this year. They do need some sort of a higher profile bat. I don't know where that could come. If it is with the infield with a guy like Chris Bryant, or it is more of an outfield who could be a Chris Bryant as well. But it's going to be interesting to see where the pieces go, because you do have Abraham Toro, you do have J.P. Crawford, you do have Ty France, who were all really good for you this last year. You acquired Adam Frazier, who you probably plan on being your second baseman. So that kind of means your infield's a little more set, and then your outfield, you got Haniger, you have um, Jared Kelenic, and then Julio Rodriguez is coming, and Kyle Lewis coming back as well. So they could use a bat, but it kind of starts getting a little crowded if they sign a guy to a big contract for a longer term deal. So it will be interesting to see where the Mariners, take that money to, because they do have a lot to spend, and we know that Jerry DiPoto, is one of the most aggressive GMs, and you can even rule out some sort of a trade that might trade one of these prospects, or even somebody that's playing right now if they find something on the market that fits them better. So the outlook, like you said, I put up and coming, and they need the young prospects to take that leap. You need Kellenick to be better. You need Logan Gilbert to be better. You're going to need a guy, your pitchers and Kirby and Hancock to come up and be good major leaguers. You're counting on a resurgence, or Robbie Ray to do what he did last year with the amount of money you paid him. So the Mariners, I feel they are a good team. I feel they could battle for that wild card spot and maybe even win 90 games. I'm a little bit higher on them than you are, just because of the pieces that are coming back and the young prospects that I like, on the pitching side especially. But it's going to be a team that's really interesting. I don't think they're quite there to battle with the with the Astros unless they make a couple bigger moves. once the lockout ends. But for sure, a team to watch out for in the coming years.
Yeah, no doubt. But we'll see. I think we're maybe just a little bit disagreement on exactly how good they're going to be this year. But we'll see what happens. And with a couple, like I say, with a couple additions, I definitely think they're a wild card contender who could win 90 games. I just don't think, as they are right now, they're a
Yeah.
90 win team. I think they do need a couple more pieces. But moving on, our next team who finished third in this division with an 86-76 record, although we don't think either one of us expect them to finish third this coming up here, are the Oakland A's. They lose. Well, I mean, you go ahead and start naming the losses. It's going to take the rest of the episode just about.
Yeah, so the key losses, and like you said, if we name them all, they're going to be, or we'll talk the rest of the episode. But Starling Marte, Mark Canna, Mitch Moreland, Jan Gomes, Jake Diekman, Andrew Chafin, and plenty of others that I didn't even want to write down to mention, but that are still, good major league players. And that's not even, question marks there around the possible trades of Matt Olson, Matt Chapman, Sean Manaea, and any other player that has any sort of value for the Oakland A's. They are looking to fire sale everything. And the only player that they've really added so far is Brett Honeywell from the Tampa Bay Rays.
Yeah, so that's pretty rough. I mean, this is a team that always has been a team that had a lot of guys, loses a lot of guys every year and brings in a lot of new guys every year. They've played that money ball for a long time, but money ball is different now because teams with money are playing money ball, if that makes sense. And the fact that they're using a lot of the same types of metrics and sabermetric extra advanced stats that the A's were at the forefront of using, they're using them to their advantage too, and they have a lot of money to spend on some of the top players. So, that whole money ball thing doesn't work out quite as well for the A's as it used to. And you look at their, at their outlook and I mean their needs. I mean if they were going to contend this year, obviously they need to replace. They've lost pretty much their entire bullpen. They need to replace that and corner outfield. They lose Starling Marte and Canha. I guess I could have just put outfield in general because Laureano can play. He's probably better suited for right, but he can play center when he comes back this year after his suspension. But I mean, the real thing they need to do is just go ahead and start fortifying that farm system. You've got, probably a top three first baseman in the game, probably number three behind Vlad Jr. and Freddie Freeman right now, that you could possibly trade. There's a pretty good amount of teams that are contenders actually looking for a first baseman this year, which is kind of unusual. You got the Braves, unless which they'll probably resign Freddie Freeman, but if they don't resign him, they've been rumored that Matt Olson might be their fallback for. You look at the Yankees need a first baseman, the Red Sox need a first baseman. You've got a pretty good amount of teams that need to make a move there. Maybe even the Dodgers if Max Muncy is not healthy too. But so there's a lot of teams that could use a first baseman, which is typically not a position that you're going to get a lot for a value for. So they can make that trade. Like you said, Sean Manaea is another guy, pretty good pitcher, lefty. They could trade and get some stuff. You got to look at maybe Ramon Laureano. Could they possibly even move him? I kind of doubt they do before the season because of his situation, but it's possible. And then, obviously Matt Chapman's been rumored for a while, but he might get moved as well. So there's just a lot of teams, that are, or a lot of players that they need to figure out what they're going to do with. And outlook wise, I don't see any way that end in a full-fledged, full-blown tear it all the way down, rebuild, lose 110 games for the next 3 years, in the way that you're looking at like the way the Rangers have been the last couple of years, or the Orioles, or the Pirates, or something. I mean, that's what you're looking at with the A's, and you're just about to go into it. So it's really not an exciting time for the A's right now because they're about. I think that's really their only option because they don't have the money to go out and replace all the guys they're losing. And I mean, all the guys they're losing, they weren't even that good when they had them all there and healthy. They were a borderline wild card team at best. So, this is going to be a rough period of time for the A's here going forward to the next couple of years.
Yeah, and especially with all of Oakland fans, or the A's fans, with them going through their battle with Oakland and potentially even moving away from there, this doesn't help them at all. Give them any break of, hey, at least we have a good team to watch. But going forward, like you said, it's going into a complete and full rebuild. Um, I put for the outlook and the needs. I've needs. I put young players, and the outlook as how do the trades help you bring in the young talent for the rebuild? Because they're not going to be a team competing. They're going to be the team that, like you said, the Orioles, the Pirates, the Tigers from a couple years ago, the Rangers, of just how much are they going to have to tear it down? And it's going to be interesting to see what this new CPA is. If there is some sort of like floor, salary floor that you have to meet. They're going to be a team that won't have a lot of salaries to meet that, if that is a thing. Uh, but yeah, the Oakland A's, it's going to be rough for the next probably 4 to 5 years for them at least. But
Yeah, absolutely.
we'll go ahead and move on to a team that might be, arguably is having one of the better off seasons so far, and really vaulting themselves into this division probably. But that's Los Angeles Angels. They finished 77-85 last year, 18 games back of the division, so really far back from our preseason predictions last year of I think we both had them winning the division. But you look at their key losses that they've had this offseason. Kurt Suzuki, veteran catcher for them. Alex Cobb, who was pretty good when he pitched. Dylan Bundy and Steve Cishek. And then you look at who they've added so far, and it's been really interesting. They were able to bring Rysel and Iglesias back. They were able to sign Noah Syndergaard on a 1-year deal. They signed Michael Lorenzen, reliever from the Reds, that they're actually going to stretch out to be a starter. And then they signed Aaron Loop from the New York Mets to be a good lefty in that bullpen. You there? All right. Well, I'll just continue on until we get Matt back. They're a team that's really interesting. The big thing that they're going to need is health. Really, they're you know Mike Trout battled injuries last year. Anthony Rendon battled
Yeah.
injuries last year. They're a team that the health is going to be something that they're going to need. Mike Trout was battling injuries. Anthony Rendon battled injuries. You're going to want Shohei Ohtani, who didn't battle injuries last year, really, but is he going to be able to continue that? Noah Syndergaard, you're bringing him in. He's a guy who's battled injuries for sure. So it's going to be interesting to see what we can do, or what the Angels can do at least going forward if they're able to stay healthy. Some of the outfield they could use, because they have Joe Adell and Brandon Marsh, Justin Upton, who are three guys who've really struggled. Marsh and um, Adell being younger prospect, and Adell's looked really bad so far. And then a solid starting pitcher is going to be something else that they need. Like I said, we have Syndergaard, who is um, coming off of injuries, who hasn't pitched much. Lorenzen is a reliever that you're stretching out. You're going to have Shohei Ohtani, but what are you going to get out of guys like Reed Detmers? What are you going to get out of a guy like Griffin Canning? Patrick Sandoval is a guy that they have that could be really good. Um, more of a probably a forward in that rotation, but he's been pretty solid so far. Um, and then the outlook of what they're going to have going forward. If they are healthy, this could be a possible like wild card team at least.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with a lot of that. On their needs, you got to remember too. We were talking about the Astros with needing to add that back end starter because we weren't sure about the health. Well, I mean, there's nobody with bigger health questions than Noah Syndergaard, so um, that's definitely something I would I'd look at. You look at their, and shortstop. I mean, right now Tyler Wade's going to be their starting shortstop, so they probably could take a look at improving that. And then, I mean, like you say, can they stay healthy? I mean, and if they are healthy, is Rendon going to play well? Because last year Rendon, when he played, I know it probably had to do a little bit with his injuries, but he really didn't play that well when he played. So is he going to be good and healthy? Once Mike Trout, he missed most of the season. Is he going to be the same Mike Trout that we've seen for years, or is he going to be maybe? I mean, there's no doubt he's going to be good, but is he going to be the best player in baseball, good like he has been for a long time, or is he going to be something not quite as good as he's always been? So yeah, I mean, with their additions they've made, I definitely do look at them as a possible wild card contender. I think I was a little too bullish on them last year. Um, but I think they're better than they showed last year. They do need to add some pieces though, and they need to have a really good um, outcome from either Brandon Marsh or Joe Adele. It's okay if one of them's not quite the guy that you were thinking, for next year, but you can't have both of those guys completely bust because those have been kind of centerpiece prospects for them for a while now, and that's something you really can't afford to have both of those guys end up being busts at the big league level. So both of them always have been looked at as high risk guys, but definitely something that the Angels playing in what's all of a sudden kind of a tough division too. They're gonna have to have some of these things fall the right way, but they can do it, and they do have the pieces to and talent to maybe make it work. So I definitely would consider them a possible wild card contender.
Yeah, absolutely, especially with the next team that we're going to talk about right here, and that's the Texas Rangers. They really didn't, the Rangers who finished about in the bottom of this division at 60 and 102 and whopping 35 games back of the division lead. But they're a team that they didn't really lose much because they were one of those teams that we were talking about with the A's that were not really good. A couple of their players have went over to like the Korean baseball league or something this year, but there were guys who probably weren't going to get playing time on this team now after what they've done so far in this offseason and what they're looking forward to do. And then you look at their ads, and we've talked a lot about the Corey Seager and Marcus Semien middle infield. That's immediately becomes one of the better, if not the best, middle infield in the game right now. And then they got a guy like John Gray, who's going to be a solid rotation arm for him, and then a solid outfielder in Cole Calhoun. They could still use some more pitching to go along with John Gray, probably some more outfield. If they can get a guy like a Seiya Suzuki or something in there, and then just overall just depth in places like this. It was a team that's so bad for the past 3 or 4 years. They signing Seager, signing Simeon, signing them. They spent a lot, but they're not a team that you're going to expect to start to battle for a division this year or anything. It's still going to take a couple more off seasons, but it's definitely a good start to their the upward trend so far. If you at least from my outlook, can how far can that upward trend go? Can they go from a 60 win team to a goal of an 80 win season? Maybe try and get around 500. And go into the next off season and see where you're at.
Yeah, so I think I agree with a lot of that. The thing you look at with the Rangers is that they're making some really big moves right now, which is great for them. But I mean, you're talking about a team that needs to add, not just. I mean, you talk about WAR, and I know WAR doesn't directly correlate to wins, but you talk about a team that needs to go from having from 60 wins to at least 90 wins to really compete for the wild card consistently. And I know they could maybe make wild card with 85, 86, but you're looking at having to add 26 or so wins to a roster. And I don't know if Seager and Simeon, Gray and Calhoun can add that much. They can add 15 wins maybe. I don't think the Rangers are done. They've still got money to spend, so I think a lot of it's going to depend on how they spend the rest of that. You talk about their needs; they definitely still need starting pitching. They really don't have much still, even with the addition of John Gray. They need to add. I think John Gray worries me if you're bringing him in to be the number one. I think they need to add somebody else. I think a guy like Kershaw might make sense for them if he doesn't go back to LA because I know he's been rumored there and he's from the area. So I think he'll be a good fit for them because they need a veteran piece in there. Then you start to kind of look at the rotation as being okay. You got Kershaw and Gray. You got a really good 1-2 at that point, and you could maybe have a couple of their other guys work out, a guy like a Dane Dunning or somebody. So Spencer Howard maybe, but right now, I mean, you're looking at like your ace is John Gray, who is for his career, although it's obviously he's been in, he's been in, in Colorado, so take it for what it's worth. But you're looking at a guy who really isn't anywhere close to an ace. But then after him, I mean, you've only got two guys that are right now major leaguers and with any kind of look at maybe being good in the future. Like Dane Dunning's one who he could end up being pretty good, but Spencer Howard, he could end up being good, but he's real inconsistent. Other than him, like this year, you had Fultonevich, who's been outrighted. Colby Allard's not very good. You really need to add something to that starting rotation to really compete. And then the bullpen, um, they needed some help in the bullpen too. They've got a couple of high upside pieces, but right now there's just not that much there. And but you look at their lineup, and the pieces that they had. I would definitely try to add somebody in that outfield because I don't trust Adolis Garcia to be what he was for the first half of this year. Um, but you've also got Nick Solak. I think is going to be decent. Like Cole Calhoun will hold down right field. You could definitely use another outfielder though, and then third base Josh Jung will come up at some point. He's a good looking prospect. You never know. I do like Nate Lau at first. Obviously, the middle infield is good. Catcher, I think they're looking pretty decent with Jonah Heim being the guy to start the season. Sam Huff eventually will play. I don't know if it'll be this year or next year, but he's a pretty good looking prospect. So, um, but moving forward for them, outlook wise, I really don't think they're in the playoff picture as it stands right now. They just don't have the depth. They've got two really good players, but no depth. Um, I think they need to add at least one. A high level starting pitcher, and then maybe another back end guy for some extra innings, and also just some depth, bench depth. Bring in a couple high upside or just just veterans that can play in that can come off the bench and pinch hit and be a fourth outfielder type guys because the guys we have for that right now are just not going to cut it. So, um, but as of right now, I think that putting together the piece when you spend as much money as they've spent, they really need to try to compete for the wild card if you're spending that much money this year. Um, and they've got to figure out a way to add 3 or 4 more pieces, and we'll see if that ends up happening. I think it'll be interesting. I think as of right now, they're probably going to be a pretty good offensive team, but I think the pitching is going to really hold them back until they get a little bit better on that end. So we'll see what happens. Definitely exciting to see a team like the Rangers that honestly has a pretty good farm system, but it's not a elite farm system, and just won 60 games. It's very good to see them look to compete. Because it's kind of unusual to see a team like that compete all of a sudden and spend a lot of money. Usually they wait till a lot of those farm pieces get going. So, but we'll see what happens. Definitely going to be exciting. Exciting year for the Rangers. I know their fans will be really pumped up for the season because they've at least got some hope now.
Yeah, and like you said, with the mentioning them not really having that good of a farm system and spending so much money, that's a product of not having a great farm system, really. And then the other factor that they just opened the brand new stadium a couple years ago, and this was the first year where fans were able to come see it. And you want to, obviously it's the new stadium, so fans are going to be excited to see that. But now that the first year of it's over, of where fans were actually allowed in the stadium, because they had it in 2020, but where is you got to keep them wanting to come, so you got to put a better product on the field. So this goes a long way to that, and to keeping your revenue going strong. And Texas has always been a place that is a destination spot for a lot of people. So to see them go from a team who was so bad, it's a lot easier for a team like Texas to get a better team. And spend this much money, outside of a place like maybe Pittsburgh. It's probably harder for them to do it, or maybe even Baltimore. It's harder to get them to do it. So really good of the it's really cool to see the Rangers be able to do this and put the product out there, even if it is just able to be an 80 win team at some point this year, and then they go into next year and maybe those prospects have provided a little bit more, maybe Sam Huff, and they can figure something out with one of those young starters. They definitely do need some other pitching, some more depth pitching at least. But their team that will probably go finish fourth in this division, but that's not it's not for lack of trying. At least this division probably went from being one of the weaker ones the past couple years to being probably one of the most strongest, that you can make a legitimate point for 3 of them being a wild card contender and a fourth that's not really far behind. So it's going to be interesting to see how the how far the Rangers are able to go once this lockout ends with adding more pieces. and then where the pieces bring them going forward and through the 2022 season, and if they are able to find something middle of the season, if they're having a good one to potentially push them towards that wild card mark. But just like as of right now, I see them, but they could probably just be an 80 win team or whatever.
Yeah.
So, but that's our division breakdown for the American League West. We'll probably be doing the AL Central next week, but we'll figure that one out. And then going forward, we got some Hall of Fame talk the next couple weeks after that. So it's going to be an interesting few weeks here for the Batflip podcast. And you have anything you wanna hit on or finish up on, Matt?
Um, Not especially. I think we're definitely looking at a very interesting outlook for 2022. One thing that interests me is the fact that last year you had four teams in the AL East who were all really, really good. Um, you know, you had the Rays, Red Sox, Yankees, and Blue Jays, and there some of these teams like the Angels and the Rangers are trying to make moves to get into it, but I mean you're going to end up with a logjam. They're going to end up with like 8 teams and only four can make the postseason. Because I don't think the Central, hey, you might even look at the Central like, as one of those teams like the Tigers maybe trying to do the same thing. You're going to look at 8 or 9 teams. A couple of these teams are going to be really disappointing this year and aren't going to compete for the postseason when they are expected to. So who it's going to be? Is that going to be the Rangers? Is that going to be is it going to be the Mariners? Is it going to be who's that going to be? And I think that's one thing. One of these teams is going to bust big time because you can't have. I mean, obviously we don't have 8 teams that are going to make the postseason. Now, there's going to be a lot more like even records. I don't think there's going to be as many runaway records. I think there's going to be a lot of teams around 500.
Yeah.
So the Mariners might be better than they were last year, but win 83 games instead of 90. So, um, the Angels, with all their improvements that they might be making, they might still be an 81, 82 win team. The Rangers, they're making all these signings. They might just barely be able to crack 500, if that. So definitely interesting to look at, and I think the landscape's definitely changing in the AL, and that's something that will be interesting to look at here in the next couple weeks with our next couple breakdowns here.
Well, and that's just pointing out what you had said. With the four playoff teams, there could be potential playoff expansion even coming with this lockout and this new CBA. So that could benefit. Maybe we go from 4 to 5 or even 6 teams. Is something that we've heard that they want to do. So you do make a good point. What if these teams just start beating up on each other and make the 500 records, which somebody would look at from the outside and say that's not impressive. But then when you look at there's 6 or 7 teams that, are within, you know, throughout the whole American League or whatever, maybe there's 6 or 7 teams within 10 games of each other. That's really not that much from top to bottom. If that were to be the case, and everyone started beating up on each other, if we have 9 to 10 teams throughout the 3 divisions that are, really good teams and battling for playoff spots, and going all in for that. So it's going to be really interesting to see how that, what the expanded playoffs, if we do get that, looks like, and how that changes the whole landscape of who's battling for a wild card and what the records actually look like.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I say, I mean, there's a lot of pieces, a lot of moving pieces. I think it's going to look a lot more like the NL has the last couple of years going forward. But definitely could be interesting to see.
Absolutely will be. But thank you guys for listening to this division breakdown of the American League West, and we'll catch you guys next week on the Batflip podcast.
Thanks, everybody.